Among literary villains, Voldemort is one of the most infamous. Called by various titles, including He Who Must Not Be Named and the Dark Lord, the Chief Death Eater stands out in readers' minds, not only because of how creepy he is, but because of the riveting backstory attached to his character in the books. The fact is, Voldemort is just an interesting villain, but he's more than that. For all his character development, there's something familiar about him. Afraid of death, craving immortality, and unnaturally pale with red eyes, he recalls one of our culture's most legendary monsters. In many ways, Voldemort resembles a vampire. Now, within the lore of the books, Voldemort isn't literally a vampire, the similarities notwithstanding. The wizarding world does have vampires, with one being present in the 6th book at one of Slughorn's parties. But Rowling deliberately chose not to dive into their mythology. As vampires were already extensively explored in other stories, and weren't a part of the myths she wanted to focus on, she made a point of glossing over them. However, this doesn't mean Rowling wasn't inspired by vampires, or the ideas and themes which surround their characters. In crafting Voldemort, she created a character which more or less functioned like a vampire. Voldemort's quest, actions, and various traits make him quite similar to the mythical monster. Before we continue, I'm Riley and this is Otherworldly Fiction. On this channel, I rant about fantasy books, discuss characters and lore, share my bookish opinion, and offer the occasional writing advice. If any of that sounds like your cup of butterbeer, hit that subscribe button. Posts are on Fridays. In studying his appearance and abilities, there are at least 6 similarities Voldemort shares with the vampire. Number 1. Unusual intelligence. It's become a trope in vampire fiction for vampires to be strangely smart. Whether it was because smart people are chosen to be bitten, or because being a bloodsucker improves one's mind, each story has their own take on this. In Anne Rice's novels, vampires have varying skills and interests, though they often excel in the areas they choose, be they science or art-based. All vampires have improved memories and can read at supernatural speed. In the Twilight Saga, the majority of the Cullens are high achievers. Most boast several degrees, including in the medical field, and without the need to sleep or rest, they can dedicate endless hours to reading, learning new languages, mastering instruments, and so on. Voldemort isn't intelligent emotionally, failing whenever he's forced to confront the magical forces that are love and friendship. But there's no denying he's a brilliant wizard. Whilst a student, he received the highest honors. People had high hopes for him, and he excelled in his courses. He earned awards, became a prefect, and was accepted into Slughorn's club. Only those students with real talent are admitted into Slughorn's inner circle, and the making of several Horcruxes in itself would have required a great deal of skill, despite their inherent evil. Many of the spells and rituals Voldemort performs throughout the series are advanced too, putting him on almost the same footing as the gifted Dumbledore. In this way, Voldemort is much like the vampire that's become popular in fiction today. Gifted, educated, and cunning, he could easily fit in among the current undead. Number 2. He resembles a vampire. One of Voldemort's defining traits, beyond his snake-like nose, is his horribly pale skin. What's more, Voldemort in the books is described as having red eyes. To readers familiar with vampire fiction, both of these traits, the washed-out pallor and the crimson gaze, are common to vampires. Moreover, vampires can be both devastatingly beautiful and horrendously ugly, depending on not only the story, but the actions of the Bloodsucker. Dracula could pass as suave and handsome. However, if he neglected to feed, he became an aged man in serious need of a manicure. In terms of looks, Voldemort undergoes a similar transformation. Initially, he's remarkably good-looking, if slightly gaunt and pale. As a young man, he looks very much like the vampires we know and love now. He has dark hair, and people are attracted to him. Like many vampires, he even uses his good looks as an asset to lure people in. With time, though, the creation of the Horcruxes mar his previously devastating appearance. He loses his humanity and, like many vampires, becomes hideous. It's important to note that early vampires were not pretty. They were animated corpses with skeletal bodies and ugly faces, a description which fits Voldemort to a T. In books like The Vampire Chronicles, the appearance of vampires can shift. Though typically attractive, even chosen for their looks, they can, through starvation or being burnt, become disfigured. Therefore, Voldemort reflects this transformation, going from beautiful to horrific, while sporting the most common traits vampires have now: scarlet eyes and colorless skin. Number 3. He's immortal. The most obvious similarity Voldemort has with vampires is, of course, his inability to age or die. Impervious to fatal damage and remaining fit for his decades, Voldemort's unnatural lifespan is powered by his Horcruxes. As they keep him tethered to life, he enjoys a seemingly endless existence. Unfortunately for Voldemort, there's an irony to his condition. When his Horcruxes are destroyed, Voldemort is killed by Harry. This is ironic because, dying at the age of 71, he was still with an immortal lifespan. Most wizards, too, live longer than Muggles. For comparison, Dumbledore died anywhere between the age of 116 and 150, depending on which source you follow, though either age is notable. As such, had Voldemort lived a normal life, one in which he never sought power or made a Horcrux, he likely would have lived longer. He could easily have lived into his hundreds, and in the quest for immortality, he ultimately shortened his lifespan instead. This is notable because vampires, in several stories, also, whether through violence or despair, meet early ends. In Anne Rice's Vampire Chronicles, some kill themselves within a few years of being made. After being promised eternal life, they kill themselves when they are still in their 20s or 30s, when they might have lived twice as long as mortals. In other cases, vampires are simply killed. For all their powers, vampires have their own special weaknesses. Likewise, Voldemort, in seeking eternal life, makes himself weak in a way. Deprived of most of his soul, he's simply less of a man. Like a vampire, he seeks to evade death, only to find it sooner than he would have if he'd left well enough alone. As a quick aside, remember to hit that like button if you're enjoying this video. Number 4. His abilities. In some books, vampires are also sorcerers. They can change shape, beguile people, or turn into mist. However, 2 of Voldemort's abilities are especially vampiric. Moreover, these talents are unavailable or avoided by most wizards. Specifically, Voldemort can manipulate the mind, and he can fly. Using occlumens, Voldemort can peer into the minds of his victims. Worse, he can control the minds of those he attacks, torturing them with bad memories, or else relying on the Imperius Curse to make them do his bidding. As for the ability to fly, there's little to say except that it seems to be an extremely rare gift. Even Dumbledore can't fly without the aid of a broom, and no other character is noted as being able to do so, though all the Death Eaters in the films are able to fly about as a black smoke. When the characters learn in the Deathly Hallows that Voldemort has gained the ability to fly, they're frightened by it. Wizards and witches traditionally have to rely on broomsticks, hippogriffs, thestrals, or transformation into animagi to travel through the air. But Voldemort can leap into the air with nothing but his wand to aid him. Both abilities appear frequently in vampire literature. In several books, vampires are shown as flying, or at least as being able to jump or climb so well that they come close to it. In the Vampire Chronicles, Anne Rice even has a term for the ability to fly, the Cloud Gift, which is usable only by those who possess ancient blood. Vampires in Twilight can't fly, but they can jump incredibly high and control their falls. Leaping between buildings or trees, they nevertheless defy gravity. As for the ability to read minds, this also appears in several stories. Almost all vampires in the books of Anne Rice can read minds, picking out thoughts or memories. In Twilight, 2 vampires, Edward and Arrow, are capable of reading minds, though their abilities manifest in different ways. At this point, mind control, telepathy, and flight are vampire tropes, and Voldemort wields all of these abilities, even setting himself apart from other wizards. Others can use the Imperious Curse and Occlumens, but the former spell is illegal, and the latter is difficult to master. As such, Voldemort is still remarkable for having these abilities, and his gift of flight is the most otherworldly of all. Number 5. He has no soul. Technically, Voldemort has a shred of his soul left, but it's negligible. In order to become immortal, vampires are known for losing their souls. Damned for their choice to feast on the living and become undead? Some even debate the merits of this claim in later ages. Carlisle Cullen believes he is damned, and Edward wonders also if he no longer has a soul, contributing to his hesitation to change Bella. It's a standard trope, and it explains why, in older stories, vampires cast no reflection. After all, mirrors are a window to the soul. If there's nothing there, then what are they going to show? It's indicated that vampires lose their souls through the wickedness of their choices and lifestyle, and this is certainly the case for Voldemort. Like any vampire, Voldemort is a murderer. He takes the lives of others to sustain his own. In a way, he even feeds off his victims. Their deaths become fuel to him, sustaining his web of Horcruxes. However, the loss of his soul is damaging. Like many vampires, Voldemort loses his humanity in stages. In the Vampire Chronicles, vampires harden, pale, and look less human with time. And so it is with Voldemort. The more he takes from others, the less human he becomes, until he doesn't even have a nose, hair, or fat. A wraith with a flattened face, he barely resembles a man. The loss of his soul proves to be his downfall, as he's left terribly weak with only a shredded bit of soul to sustain him when he finally does battle with Harry. Even when Harry encounters a piece of his soul in the seeming preamble to the afterlife, Dumbledore notes that Harry can't help the shrunken and helpless form, implying Voldemort is, in a sense, damned. Number 6. He drinks blood. It might be for only one book, but Voldemort kept himself alive by drinking the blood of unicorns in the Forbidden Forest. What's more, he fed off of Quirrell's life force too, acting as a parasite to the hapless Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher. Voldemort shows no aversion to literally drinking blood, though it's presented as an evil act. By drinking the blood of a unicorn, any wizard or witch who does so is cursed to a half-life. In the end, perhaps the unicorn blood was his downfall. After all, when he was killed in his 70s, he likely did die at half his potential lifespan. In later books, Voldemort isn't shown as drinking blood. However, he is remade in it. When placed into the cauldron and goblet of fire to be reborn, he requires Harry's blood to revive himself. Peter Pettigrew also sheds his own blood to bring his master back, and Voldemort takes the bones of his father. Harry's blood, though, is the most important ingredient in this ritual, as it gives Voldemort a connection to his foe. Part of vampire stories is not only the drinking of blood, but the exchange of it, and Voldemort absorbs the blood of Harry when he is finally given a new body. From draining unicorns dry to stealing from a teenager, Voldemort couldn't act more like a vampire if he tried. In conclusion, vampires weren't extensively explored in Harry Potter. Though they existed, Rowling chose to flesh out other mythical beings, particularly those closer to home. Aside from a cameo in the 6th book, vampires neither appear in the series or have an impact on the story. Some used to suspect Snape was a vampire, and Rowling did play with the idea of including a vampire teacher, but this idea was ultimately scrapped. Instead, Rowling explored the idea of something like a vampire. Exploring themes of immortality and death, she played with the concepts which surround vampires in creating Voldemort. Voldemort is pale and red-eyed. He can read minds and fly. He can't age or die. He's seen drinking blood, and he barely has a soul. With all the traits common to a vampire, Voldemort still offers readers a vampire-like being. According to popular myth, Voldemort practically is a vampire, though he's not classified as such in the books. Do you wish vampires had been explored more in the series? Are there any other similarities you've noticed between Voldemort and vampires? Sound off in the comments. And if you've enjoyed this video, like and subscribe. Thank you for watching, and happy reading.